God here. And it's football season. And it's like 100 degrees outside. Sorry about that. Welcome to Season 4 of Gods of Odds, hosted by two of my favorites, Brad Hoiseth and Dave Dabbah.
Welcome to the Gods of Odds. It is week number 17 of your National Football League season. That is Brad Hoiseth over there in beautiful Southern California. I'm Dave Dabbah up in Northern California. And Mr. Hoiseth, I have to say, I'm not sure if you happened to catch Aaron Rodgers on the Pat McAfee show the other day, but things got so bad for Aaron Rodgers that he thought the good folks over at ESPN were actually going to dump to commercial because Mr. Rodgers was up to it again. He continues to say, quite frankly, some fairly crazy things. Brad, the big question for you is there a bigger narcissist in the National Football League than Aaron Rodgers at this point?
Yeah, I don't know. He's pretty amazing at keeping himself relevant. The guy hasn't played a football game in a year, and yet still that's what the league wants to talk about, right? I mean, when you're in New York and your Giants aren't going to the playoffs and your Jets aren't going to the playoffs and the Bills are barely hanging on, I guess somebody's got to make news, and it might as well be Aaron Rodgers, right? I mean, at the end of the day, the Jets are giving him a lot of money to go in front of a podium and say crazy stuff. So,
yeah, and it's not like they didn't have any evidence of what Rodgers was like before they signed him either. So, anything wacky that he happens to say inside or outside of a darkness retreat should come of no surprise to the New York Jets organization. What got me yesterday, though, was really his comments around, I didn't really want to come off of the IR list because I didn't want to take a roster spot away from anybody, which is just unbelievable because that's all he's been talking about since he got hurt was taking somebody's roster spot. But look, enough about Rodgers. I think the most important thing I can ask you is, Brad, are you on air right now?
You like that? That's my new addition to the Gods of Oz studio there. Little Christmas gift there. We kind of thought that was kind of humorous, but anyways, there it is, right there. Finally,
after 4 years, Brad is investing in the show.
There you go. There you go. Hey, let's start investing in some of these games because we're both coming off a week we just soon forget. So let's get going and get it over with. The Cards are at the Eagles. That's my first game. Eagles are 10.5-point favorites at home. This is that time of year, Dave, when, certain teams just kind of bail on the season. And other teams have got a lot more to play for it, which is obviously the case here. The Eagles are 10.5-point favorites. I know they haven't looked great, Dave, but there's a handful of teams out there that have had a really poor season. Some of them are still playing hard. The Jets are still playing hard. The Patriots are still playing hard. That's because the Jets and Patriots have good coaches, right? I'm not quite so sure about what's going on in Arizona. I know it's a bad football team. And so I'm going to take the Eagles. I'm going to give that 10.5. I just feel like the Eagles have a lot to play for. They'll try to get that thing over with and clean it up as quickly as possible so they can go into next week knowing what's going on with their playoff scenarios.
Yeah. This Eagles team has had a hard time. It's not that I don't think the Eagles are going to win this. And it is the Cardinals, and there's some talk that Kyler might not actually play. And if that were the case, if that actually happens, and we're recording this actually on Thursday morning, which is crazy early for you and me, Brad. We usually record this in the afternoon. But I as of right now, I believe Kyler's going to play. And the Eagles have, quite frankly, just really not looked that good. They are just an okay team. They're definitely a a top 10 team in the National Football League. Do I think they have enough in the tank to go all the way back to the Super Bowl and win it? I don't know about that. Too many questions in the secondary for me to feel comfortable, as well as questions about their lack of offensive performance. This Cardinal team, is basically more down than it is up. It's just the point spread. I mean, like the Eagles have not really won too many games this year over 10 points. And it's, Vegas being Vegas. I just don't like the point spread. It's in the big point spreads last week, 3 out of 4 of the games actually went to the underdogs. I'm going to stay in that vein with this particular game and take the I almost said the Eagles after all of that. I'm going to go with the Cardinals.
Yeah, Dave, the reason I'm not is that the Eagles are still in a 3-way tie for the best record in the NFC. I mean, yeah, we can badger them all they want. They're 11-4. They lead the NFC East, who, a couple weeks ago, I think a lot of people would have told you the Cowboys were the second best team in football. But the Eagles just keep plugging away. And, yeah, it hasn't looked great. And the defense is a mess. But that offense is really capable of scoring a lot of points. And like I said, it's week 17 now. The Cardinals, they're making golf plans at this point. The Cardinals are, what are they, 3-12? I mean, they're just terrible. So I'm gonna stay with that favorite. I'm gonna give that 10.5. I actually probably would have bet it if it was 12 or 13.
It's one of the beautiful things about being an Arizona Cardinal, and Brad, there aren't a lot of them. But the golf plans are just initially inherent in being a Cardinals football player, because there you are in the beautiful Phoenix metropolitan area where basically 12 months out of the year you can play golf in quite frankly really nice conditions. I mean, obviously during the summer you got to get out early or late. But this Cardinal team is certainly interesting. All right. So moving on to the what you just called the second best team in the National Football League. I would argue that they are the second best team in the National Football League, at least when it comes to home games. The Dallas Cowboys. I like to remind everybody my pick to go to the Super Bowl is home against the Detroit Lions. Not sure yet exactly what else the Lions are really playing for at this point, other than the potential number 1 seed and a potential bye, which is a lot for them to play for at this juncture. But this is a Cowboy team that has lost 2 roadies in a row coming home. Mike McCarthy said yesterday, and I'm paraphrasing now, but in a press conference, that they're taking this game seriously. Like, when is a coach going to get up in front of the press and say they're not taking a game seriously, McCarthy? So I like the Cowboys a lot in this. It's a 6-point spread. I expect big things out of Dak this week. I think the defense is going to show up. The running game will be okay. This is just going to be all on Dak's arm. I like the Cowboys a lot in this one.
Yeah, I'm going to go with you just because they've been so incredibly dominant at home so far this year. I don't even know what the numbers are, but it's been pretty overwhelming. I mean, they've been if you consider if it was just about playing home games, the Cowboys are the best team in football this year. So
yeah.
They're playing a Lions team that, I mean, the Lions they're tied, right? They're tied with, the Niners and the Eagles with the best record in the NFC at 11-4. I don't think there's I would say they're the third best team of those 3 teams. In fact, I would still put them behind the Cowboys when it comes to, best teams in the NFC. But, the NFC to me got wide open last week. I'm interested to see what's going to happen with the 49ers after they got clobbered by the Baltimore the other night. But when it comes to the Lions, they won their first divisional title since 30 years or 31 years, something like that. But I'm not entirely convinced. I mean, the Vikings had all kinds of chances to win that game. Nick Mullins is a mess, right? He throws 4 interceptions, and the Vikings are still in that game. That Lion defense has regressed this year, Dave. They've not played well down the stretch. The offense doesn't seem to have quite the firepower that it had at the beginning of the year. I think they're going into a hornet's nest. Dallas would love to win. I think Dallas probably shuts it down after this week. Because they don't next week. If the Eagles win, I think they're going to win out and win that division. But they still have a chance to win the division. Right now, they're a game back of the Eagles, and until that's over with, I think the Cowboys will play hard. So I'm going to take the Cowboys and give this 6.
Guy, you remember last year, especially at the start of the season, how bad the Detroit Lions defense was, and then they got sort of better as the season went on. And then this year, the defense started out pretty hot and has sort of come back to middle of the pack. Love Dan Campbell's loyalty to Aaron Glenn. It's his defensive coordinator. I just like it's so funny. This Detroit Lions team has a real opportunity to do some damage in the playoffs this year. For the first time in a very long time, because quite frankly, outside of the San Francisco 49ers, I think the Lions can beat anybody else at home. And I just think that their Achilles heel is going to be their defense at the end of the day. And to some degree, Jared Goff in some big spots. So this is an important game for Detroit to prove that they can actually win some games against a dominant team at home. So I think we're going to see the real Jared Goff is going to stand up in this one. And I agree, Cowboys are going to take it.
Yeah, and then I think the Lions will shut things down next week because they're going to be the 3 seed no matter what if they don't win this game.
Right.
And so then you'll see things shut down. But I'm with you. I think the Lions are. I think they're a fun team to watch. It's a nice story, but I don't think it goes well come this weekend in Dallas.
Leave it to 2 Minnesota Viking fans to call the Detroit Lions a nice story after 31 years of not making it into the winning a division.
It's a nice story, and it's a team that's on the rise, but I just think when you got Jared Goff as your quarterback, the ceiling is only so high, Dave.
I'm not sure this is much about it's a team on the rise as it was 2 other teams on the fall.
All right, let's go to my next game. It is those Niners, and they're at Washington, the Commanders. And Washington's got a lot of problems. Offensively, I don't know what they're doing. I mean, they keep putting Thurston Howell III out there to play, and every time they put in Jacoby Brissett, their offense seems to play a lot better. I know that they wanted to see if the kid's the future. I think it's pretty obvious that at least with the current roster they have, he's not. I think there's some limitations there with Washington. First of all, they don't really have a red zone threat. They got a bunch of little flyers on the outside like Terry McLaurin and those kinds of guys, but their tight end is terrible. Ian Thomas, he's got to be one of the worst tight ends in the league this year. He drops, half the passes thrown at him. He gets called for penalties, holding, you name it. So they have some real deficiencies in the red zone. They're playing a Niners team that I think wants to show everybody that last week was a fluke. I think it's a big trouble time for Washington. I'm going to take the Niners. I know it's a big line. It's 13.5. But the Niners, they got a big monkey they want to get off their back after last week.
I have flip-flopped so many times on these big lines, Brad. I was so mad at you for taking this game. I was like, "Come on, Hoiseth, you make me really have to think about it." After watching the Ravens basically punched the 49ers in the mouth last weekend, which is quite frankly something we all should have seen coming. And we just didn't. We were just blindsided by the 49ers team. There's been one thing that has been consistent with the San Francisco 49ers this year, and that is when they lose a game, they don't just lose one, but they lose multiple games in a row. I think we're going to see that.
Are you saying they're going to lose this game, Dave? Is that
against the spread?
No, that would be a prediction.
Against the spread. It's just a big spread. And as Sam Howell has gone to the bench, I look at this and I think it's just too many points for me to swallow. And I know a lot of people who are giving their prognostications about this game are saying the same thing, but are still swallowing the red pill that is offered to the San Francisco 49ers fans who entered the Matrix. So I sort of like look at this and I think I'm not going to fall for it. It's a big number. I'd rather actually talk about what's the name change going to be for the Commanders next season. I'm not sure that they're going to get this done for next season, but I'm still a big proponent of what their basketball team wears occasionally, where their jerseys actually just say the district. And I love like a whole Hunger Games theme for this Commanders football team. I would love to see a name change in that direction.
Well, it's going to be Hunger Games for their quarterbacks this week, Dave, because their offensive line is not very good. I know Jacoby Brissett's coming in. He's done some nice things for Washington the last couple of weeks, but this is not the teams they've been playing. This is the Niners now. They can get after it defensively. I see all kinds of problems. Riverboat Ron, I think, is gone. I don't think he makes it through this thing when it's all said and done. It's just,
I mean, clearly the Riverboat Ron thing or scenario, he will not be most likely the head coach of the district next season at all. I'm not really sure exactly if what the direction is there. Bill Belichick's name has been floated with several of these teams. The one coach that could come into a National Football League team and turn it around overnight, of course, is Harbaugh leaving Michigan. And regardless of wherever he goes in the National Football League, he could make an immediate impact on a NFL franchise, I think. All right, moving on to my second game, which is the Baltimore Ravens at home against the Dolphins. Ravens are favored by 4. I've heard a lot this week about basically a letdown game with the Ravens at home. Look, this is probably going to be a really close game, which is why the Vegas line is 4. I'm not expecting a blowout here. However, I'm expecting the Ravens to actually win this game pretty easily. I know, Brad, one of your favorite players in the National Football League has made a huge difference with this Dolphins secondary since his return in one Jalen Ramsey, which I'm sure you're factoring into whatever decision you're about to shed out to the world here. But I like the Ravens a lot. Their running game is absolutely fantastic. And what they exposed last week with the San Francisco 49ers is something a lot of us up here in the Bay Area have known for quite some time, which is, outside of a particular tackle, the 49ers offensive line, quite frankly, really isn't that good. So at least in pass protection, and I think this Ravens team is going to get after Tua just enough to win by more than 4 points.
One thing we didn't talk about with that San Francisco game was the quarterback didn't play very well, Dave. I mean, Brock Purdy, might have been his worst game as a pro, really. But this team they're facing this weekend, the Dolphins, is a very different style of team than are the 49ers. The 49ers are a line up and smash it down your throat sort of team. That's not what these Dolphins are. And if Miami wins this game, they're the 1 seed.
Yeah.
Temporarily. Well, for a week anyways. Right? And so now I don't think they're a solid 1. I think Baltimore looks pretty good right now, but the line is 4. And I know the Miami's got all kinds of injury issues. Waddle's probably not going to play. Tyreek is still hobbling around. Tua's got a thumb. A couple offensive linemen are dinged up. Mostert now has got an ankle.
I certainly, with everything you're saying, hope you go with the Dolphins.
I'm going to go with the Dolphins, Dave. I think it's a Justin Tucker field goal at the end of the game. A key injury on the other side of the ball, Zay Flowers is a little bit dinged up. You could make a case that he's one of the best young rookie wide receivers in the league. And so I get a sense that it's going to be a closer game. There's got to be a little bit of a letdown after leaving San Francisco. Plus, it's a little bit less time to work, get ready for the game. That was a late game. So I'm going to take the Dolphins. I don't know that they win this game, but I think that there's obviously a lot of reasons to give it everything you got, and for all those guys to play, right? Now, whether or not they're healthy enough to win it, I don't know. But when they're healthy, they're pretty entertaining and pretty fun to watch. So I'm going to take the Dolphins. I'm going to take that 4 points from you.
All right. Well, it's interesting. I like your thought process here. Well, their number 1 wide receiver might not be available. Their number 2 wide receiver is definitely not playing. Their top couple running backs are banged up. Their quarterback is banged up. But it's
offensive line's a mess.
Yeah,
but here's the thing about it. If you are going to,
I mean, like when you actually just sit there and listen to it.
Right. No, but I talked you into the Ravens, right? No, yeah. But if it is something you're thinking about betting on, clearly wait, see what happens, because the line is predicated on all those things, it's factoring in all the injuries and all those kinds of things. So, the Ravens, if none of those guys play, they may go off as a, 5 or 6 point favorite, I would think.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that. The amazing thing from last week, Brad. Last week was like the first couple weeks of the season where everything you knew you just had to throw out the door, because none of it seemed to matter last week at all. You look at what happened last week; it was just crazy. It was as if you had to throw away the last 10 weeks of the National Football League season, disregard everything you thought you knew entering last week. And I think we're back to a little bit of reality here in some of these games this week.
Yeah, the one that just stymied me was, and I made a comment last week about, does Rudolph come and get a win before Christmas? And he did,
And he did.
Who figured? The Steelers had looked so terrible.
Oh, yeah. And in fact, they had a whole package set up for Rudolph, the red-nosed reindeer, and all this stuff before the start of the game. And, the real Mason Rudolph's going to show up at some point, but I'm not sure that's happening this week.
All right. So my next one is the Chargers at the Broncos. The Chargers are, officially out of the playoff hunt. No surprise there. They won just 5 games all year. The Broncos are pretty much on life support. I think I saw a stat where even if they win this game, they only have like a 12% chance of them making the playoffs. But this is one of those things where our team's going to keep playing hard, or are they going to quit? I get a sense the Chargers have quit. And I don't think Sean Payton's about to allow that to happen in Denver. So the line, I looked at the line and it was, the Broncos by 5.5. They really looked terrible last week, but they're at home. I think there's still a lot of pride there, and I think Sean Payton is a guy that's going to demand that guys play hard till the end. Otherwise, he's probably going to get rid of him during the offseason because he's not going anywhere, right? Whereas the Chargers, they're already on a what I would call a temporary coach, end of the year, the guy that replaced Staley. They don't really have their quarterback. So I just feel like this is a Broncos win, comfortable win. So the Broncos are favored by 5.5. I'm going to give the points.
Yeah, who knows? Honestly, North America, who the hell knows? Since Russell Wilson has been sent to the bench some 24 hours ago. The breaking news broke on that, and there's been some stuff leaked out, Brad, about how the Broncos came to Russell and allegedly asked him to rework his deal, and he said no. Sean Payton had finally sort of had enough, which is interesting because, I know Russell Wilson for the last 4 weeks hasn't really played as well as he did earlier in the season, but if you throw his stats up and you throw it up against Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen and everything, he's right there. There hasn't been great quarterback play in the National Football League this season. And Russell Wilson is right there with the other, sort of alleged great quarterbacks in the NFL today. But when you watch him, you can understand where Sean Payton's a little bit frustrated, and they certainly don't want to pay out that huge contract if they can get out of it. So what Denver's going to do is they've benched him. He's still, at least as of right now, planning to be active for Sunday's matchup. But I mean, if Sean Payton really believes his Denver Bronco team has a legitimate chance at making the playoffs, why make that move in the first place? Brad, I am so close to flip-flopping on this. I can't even tell you. It just doesn't make any sense. They're starting Jared Stidham at quarterback instead of Russell Wilson in this game. And what kind of message is that sending to the rest of this Bronco team, heading into the last 2 games of the season? This Sean Payton experiment so far has been an up and down Josh Allen style roller coaster ride. I have no idea what to do on this one. I am so close to going with the Chargers, but I can't. I'm going to stick with the Broncos.
Yeah, I know. This is a funky game. No question about it. Garrett Stidham or not, the Broncos can still play a little defense, and the Chargers, have got, I don't even know who their quarterback is. Easton Stick or something. Sounds like a baseball bat, if you ask me. So I mean, I just get this sense that Sean Payton at home. It is a good message to be certain, but he's basically saying you're not going to be a quarterback next year.
Yeah,
and we're moving on without you. And we don't know what the makeup is of the rest of that locker room. We don't know how the rest of that locker room feels about Russell Wilson, right? So. Unless you're a fly on the wall, there's not really, any way to know if the team's going to support this decision or if we're going to find out this week. I'm betting on Payton though. He turned around at the beginning of the year and actually made them a competitive football team down the stretch. I think he's got a plan. That plan just doesn't involve Russell Wilson.
Yeah, and what it's going to actually end up costing the Denver Broncos. So what they'll do is they'll find a way to get out of this contract. And they'll take what's called a dead hit over probably the next 2 years. And the number I saw on this late last night was $85 million. They'll have to pay out Russell Wilson to get out of this. And that money will be spread out over 2 years. I'm not sure if it's even across both years, but that's a significant cap hit when you look at what the Broncos actually paid for Wilson in the first place. All right, moving on. Packers at the Vikings. Jordan Love, of course, has played fairly well. Vikes are favored by 2. I've heard a lot of grumblings that Dobbs should be put back atop the quarterback tree in Minnesota. For years, I've had to hear Brad Hoiseth complain about Kirk Cousins and how they weren't going to go anywhere. Well, now that Kurt's been hurt, it's clear to me they're definitely not going anywhere with any of these other quarterbacks either. Mullins is, I just don't even know what to say. And with Dobbs, I'm not even sure what to say. I mean, he scored 0 points against that Raider defense. I remind you of that. I say, why not give Hall a chance? He played well for a quarter and a half before he got hit and had a concussion. I would rather the Vikings see what they have in Hall here in the last week and a half of the season than hand the ball back over to 2 known entities. Maybe bump Mullins all the way down to 3rd string, have Dobbs as a change of pace guy that you can bring in occasionally. But I say give Hall a chance. That's what I'm hoping for as a Viking fan. It's a 2-point spread. It's hard for me to believe that the Packers are going to go into Minnesota and win this game, though Love has been playing really well. He's getting a little bit more consistency from his wide receivers, and they've done a much better job with their running game in the past couple weeks. I mean, all eyes basically are pointing towards a Packer victory here. But I'm going to go ahead and take the home team just because I think the Vikings head coach is going to make the right decision at quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, the Vikings and the Packers are really in the same spot. If you look at the numbers, for whichever team wins, if the Vikings win, they have like a 49% chance of still making the playoffs.
Yeah.
And if the Packers win, they have a 55% chance of them winning going to the playoffs. And so both of these teams, they're just trying to get back to 500. Obviously, it's a real emotional game. The 2 teams, it's a great rivalry, that kind of thing. If you're Kevin O'Connell, what's the end game here? I mean, are you if you're looking for a future quarterback, then you got to turn it over to Hall and see what he's got. I mean, Clearly neither Dobbs nor Mullins is the future of the Vikings franchise. Now, if you're trying to make the playoffs, I believe you got to play Josh Dobbs. So it's really kind of, I think we're going to find out a lot about what's important. Nick Mullins, to me, is a terrible quarterback, Dave. I mean, he's just so careless with the football. It's unbelievable. Dobbs, I think, had some unfortunate things happen to him. When he got balls picked off, it was because wide receivers had it, ricochet off their hands, things like that. He made some bad decisions, no question about it, but at least I thought he gave him a chance to win football games. Mullins, I don't feel has any future of being a starting quarterback in this league. I don't think Dobbs much either, but Hall, we really just don't know anything about. And so I don't know that they've made a final decision on that. Have they made a decision on that, Dave?
No, they haven't. There's been all sorts of speculation, but nothing remotely close to a indication one way or the other yet.
Yeah, well, I'm going to take the Vikings. I'm going to give the 2. I think their defense is pretty good still. It's one of the great stories, I think, in the league is how much improvement they've made with their defense. They still have Justin Jefferson. Hawkinson, I know, was a little bit dinged up last I saw. They're about as healthy as they've been at the wide receiving crew now in a while. So whoever comes in there and plays, I think the message is pretty clear. Just don't turn the ball over. That's what's beating them the last 3 weeks, Dave. It's not the defense. It's just the turnovers. And Nick Mullins was just incredibly careless with the football. You just can't, he's just playing. He's playing with fire, holding out there like a loaf of bread, and ultimately somebody's going to swat it away. So, but I'm going to take the Vikings. I'm going to give the 2.
Yeah, when the quarterback drops back to pass in practice, He doesn't have like the real pressure of what's happening in a real game. And I think, Mullins, the Mullins mistakes, you go all the way back to the start of the season as well with Cousins, all the fumbling issues this team has had. I look at this season as a completely wasted season by head coach Kevin O'Connell. This team could easily be sitting there at 10 wins right now if they had done a better job, in my opinion, on the coaching side of the fence. I think they got a little lackadaisical with a wide variety of things they were doing with the offense last year. And they took things for granted entering this season. And there's been plenty of opportunities for this team to win other games that they've actually ended up losing. So I'll give them a hall pass for this year. But next year will be an important year for Kevin O'Connell.
Yeah, and speaking of, you said dead cap money. That's, Denver's staring right down the barrel of what the Vikings would have been staring down 2 years ago had they gotten rid of Cousins. And as it turned out, they didn't have him for half this year anyway, so they might as well have gotten rid of him, right? I know you're a big Cousins guy, but the future is not Kirk Cousins with the Vikings, I don't think. I mean, I think there'll be pressure from the fans to sign him to a 1 or 2 year deal, something like that. But the question is he going to take a pay cut finally? Because he's been grossly overpaid for the last 3-4 years.
I'm willing to bet that there's a bit of a financial compromise. I think the money part's big here, and you sort of get to the point in the NFL where you're like, the management it definitely has the upper hand in these contract negotiations. And if Cousins wants to stay in Minnesota, I'm sure they'll come up with a number that they feel comfortable with. And if he doesn't, he'll explore other options, other big ticket options, potentially in Seattle, where, I'm sure Geno Smith isn't going to really work out. And who knows with the 49ers? Yeah.
By the way, if the Vikings lose this game and the Bears win, Dave, guess where the Vikings are in the standings?
Dead last.
All right. With that, I'm going to go to my fourth game. It's the Panthers at the Jaguars. Panthers have been kind of playing tough, I guess you could say. The Jaguars now, they got the Colts breathing down their neck. They've had all these injuries, and Trevor Lawrence has, I think, regressed immensely as a quarterback. But I just kind of feel like Jacksonville really has to have this game. If they win, they're 81% chance of making the playoffs. Brings them to 9-7, and then pressure then goes back onto the Bills and the Colts and teams like that. So I get a sense the Jags at home are going to be okay. Lawrence, I think, will play. I know he's been. They've been doing whatever they can to get him on the field at practice and stuff like that. So I think they're about ready to get Zay Jones back as well, which I think was a big loss for that team. So I'm going to take the Jaguars. I know it's kind of a big line at 7, but I think the Jags at home will get things turned around this weekend.
My hoodie has some Carolina Panther blue in it, Brad. Today, I hate this game. I really am not happy with you for some of the games you picked this week. Like, I think we only agree on one of your games this week, and that's because of all your point spread magic. Your Brad Hoiseth. I live in Southern California. I've got access to pixie dust. It's just crazy. Yeah, you're on air. I absolutely hate this game for so many reasons. I don't know if you noticed, I dropped a note in, but Matt Barkley is suddenly back in the National Football League.
Southern California
Jacksonville Jaguars have signed and activated Matt Barkley. He is theoretically going to be their starting quarterback come Sunday. Look, when I saw that, and we all know how bad the Panthers have been. They played a little bit better the last couple weeks. I expect them to continue to play a little bit better as the last couple weeks of the season go on. I can't believe I'm going to do this, but I'm going to go with the Panthers, led by one Bryce Young in this particular game. I'm going to take the Panthers, Brad. I don't know.
Well, here's the latest update on Trevor Lawrence. He's expected to practice on Thursday, Dave. Expected.
So, there you go. Look, I mean, if Trevor
go ahead.
If he ends up playing, then obviously. But even if he does play, he hasn't really played all that well most of the season outside of like 4 or 5 games. I mean, he's been really disappointing. You expect quarterbacks to take leaps forward, especially the great ones. And I think, you're looking at like the second coming of, Cousins throws a tighter spiral in year 15 or 16 of his career than Lawrence does. So Cousins makes traditionally better decisions than Lawrence does.
I think Cousins makes better decisions than Dave Dabbah by taking the Panthers.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I mean, outside of all the vaccination crap that Cousins actually had out there, outside of all of that,
Dave, all you staunch Vikings fans, you have amnesia. you guys forgetting about 4 or 5 weeks how bad the guy was. He's not. Kirk Cousins is not a winner. When you've been playing in the league for 13, 14 years, Dave, and you get into a 2-minute warning scenario, you should never see a quarterback do this right here. Okay.
Yeah.
If you're a good quarterback, you know exactly what to play to run and how to run a 2-minute. He's not very good at it. And he's been in the league for now. Kirk Cousins has got a strong arm. I'll give you that. He's got a strong arm. He's fairly accurate. He's just he's checked down Charlie when it matters, Dave. And that's why his completion percentage is high. That's why his yardage goes up every year. And that's why you don't see him playing in big bowl games.
Okay, but the question really is, how many better quarterbacks are there in the National Football League today? Especially when you look at how many
15.
of the quarterbacks have gone down with injury. I think that number's a little high. I think that's a mean number, 15.
Well, right now he's got an Achilles, so there's 32 that are better, right?
Wow. Yeah. Exactly.
On air, by the way. On air.
On air.
All right, who is it?
It is okay. It's my pick next. Up next, we've got the Saints at the Buccaneers. My Baker Mayfield is back, Brad. Love Baker Mayfield, as you know. Bucs favored by 3 in this one. I know that you probably had Derek Carr on your Christmas card distribution list this year, or you took him off of it. By the way, Hoiseth's put out one of the finest holiday cards every year. Always a good read. Baker Mayfield is playing well enough to win this game. The Saints, of course, will put up a bit of a fight. I think we both agree that Dennis Allen probably shouldn't be the head coach of the Saints. He's done a good enough job to keep his job, I think, for another season, which probably isn't such a great thing for the Saints organization in the long run. But it is as it is, not how it should be with the New Orleans Saints. I'm going to take the Bucs.
The Bucs are sneaky right now, Dave. They're playing pretty decent football. I can't stand Todd Bowles, you know that, but nonetheless, they're winning despite Todd Bowles, and they're winning despite Baker Mayfield. They got a really talented running back in Rashad White. Mike Evans, I think, has played really well. Baker tends to every once in a while just kind of stare him down a little too much for me. and not use the other guys. When he gets Godwin and Otten and some of those guys involved, they can be a pretty entertaining team to watch. I'm with you. I'm going to take the Buccaneers here. They're playing as good a football right now as just about anybody in the NFC. I thought I would never say that, but they're playing well. They're only 8-7. And I understand it's the NFC South. But, the Saints, this is the last hurrah for them. They have to go to Tampa. I'm going to take the Buccaneers at home and give the 3.
Yeah, two sort of surprises in the NFC right now, especially in the second half of the season. One of the games we're not covering just because, once Tommy DeVito got benched, I think Brad was like, there's no way I could take that Rams Giants game now with a 4 or 6 point spread or whatever it is. But the Rams have been playing fantastic football over the past 6 weeks, and Matthew Stafford has looked like he found the fountain of youth there in beautiful Southern California, which is not unheard of for people when they end up living in SoCal. The Rams are the other team that is definitely, at least on paper, a bit of surprise entering this upcoming week. But yeah, I'm with you. The Bucs are going to win this one, and that will be it for the Saints this year.
All right. Well, we're going to go to my final game here. It's the Steelers at the Seahawks, and Pete Carroll's been sleeping with clover leaves lately because he's been winning a lot of really tight games down the stretch.
I mean, there is an image, Pete in his PJs.
Well, and so they're at home against the Steelers team, who I still don't think is any good, Dave. I know that Mason Rudolph had a nice game, and it almost looked like they were a good football team last week, but they're not. They're really not. And both of these teams are really very similar, I think. But the Hawks are at home. That's a really tough place to go in there and play. I just don't think the Steelers defense is very good. I see the Seahawks putting up a lot of points in that game, and the Steelers just not being able to match point for point. I'm going to take the Hawks and give the 3.5.
I saw this probably about 20 minutes before we went on air, Brad Hoiseth. Kenny Pickett says he's healthy to play, but it's up to the Steelers whether or not he'll be active or not. If I were the Steelers, I would find a way to keep Kenny sitting in this particular game. I think the jury is absolutely out on Kenny Pickett as a starting quarterback in the National Football League. I'd be very disappointed in the Steelers organization if they decided to roll out Kenny Pickett at the start of next season as their starting quarterback. Maybe a nice backup, but they need something definitely more dynamic than Kenny Pickett at QB. This feels trappy to me. The Seahawks have been playing, better football. This is definitely, yes, Pete Carroll with his clover leaves in bed. Seems like a game that the Hawks will ultimately end up winning. I like the Steelers to keep this thing close enough to make you scared as this game goes on. I'm actually going to go ahead and roll the dice on this and say, Mike Tomlin. There's just something about Mike Tomlin, Brad, isn't there?
There is.
He's going to find a way. The Steelers are going to find a way to win this game.
I got to be honest with you. They're two of my favorite coaches. They really are.
Yeah.
I think they're two really, really good coaches that just don't have a full deck of cards that they're playing with right now. And so the pure fact that they're both still in the playoff hunt, I think kudos to both of them because neither one of them have, an all-star quarterback. Neither one of them have an offensive line. Neither one of them really have a defense that's that great. Yet there they are sitting there at the end of the season playing for something on the final couple of weeks. But It's that home crowd. It's that 12th man thing in Seattle. That's a tough place to go. And when you're not a talented team, if they go with Pickett, I think that's probably the wise choice if he's healthy. Rudolph, Christmas is over for Rudolph. So might as well go with Dancer and Prancer and Vixen or whatever. Right. So if that's Pickens, if he wants to have any shot at starting in this league, he's got to figure out a way to win some games down the stretch and get his team to the playoffs. Yeah.
I think if they start, they're definitely not going to win the game. I think they've got a better chance with Mason Rudolph. And the deal here is that, look, I'm not saying Mason Rudolph should be their starting quarterback going forward. But at least through the next couple games, he just gives them a better chance of winning with this particular team. He's got a stronger arm. He can throw a deeper ball. Pickett is still struggling reading defenses, which is why he gets hit so much. Mason, who was basically ready to start selling real estate as his second career, just has to be looking at this as a bonus stint in the National Football League. I like the Steelers to find a way, but this is no doubt is going to be a close game at the end of the day. I'm not expecting a blowout either way. All right, last game of the week of our top 10 games worth actually spending some money on. Antonio Pierce and the Las Vegas Raiders are heading to Indianapolis to do battle with the Gardner and the Colts. In this particular game, for some strange, bizarre reason, the Colts are actually favored by 3. Apparently, the people in Las Vegas have already forgotten what the Raiders did to the Kansas City Chiefs over the holiday weekend. I like the Raiders in this one. The Raiders defense played so well against Kansas City. Their offense sputtered. I expect it to be a bit of a reverse of fortunes this particular week. I think the offense gets back on track. They're a big fan of domes with this offense, Brad. I like the Raiders and basically ending the Colts season.
Yeah, I'm going to go the other direction. This is one of my biggest beefs I had last weekend, by the way, Dave, and it had nothing to do with the Raiders and their fans and the way they played or anything. It was some of the post-game comments by guys like Phil Simms and who else was part of that team? It was Phil Simms, it was Bill Cowher, and some of the old guard, right? And
Boomer.
I'm watching the post-game show to this, and all they're talking about is how Antonio Pierce is bringing back Raider football. Come on, Dave. The Raiders were in their heyday in the mid-'80s, or late 70s, mid-'80s, right? Most of the people watching the game today, they don't even know what that means. What does that mean? And Dave Casper is not walking through that door, Dave.
Right.
And neither is Kenny Stabler or Clarence Davis or Gene Upshaw. I can go on, and Ted Hendricks isn't coming back. I mean, what does that mean? It's just, to me, it's just lazy announcing. He's bringing back Raider football. You know what?
Brad, you went back too far. You went back to black and white TV.
Right. But if you're bringing back Raider football, that's whatever that means. That doesn't work in 2023, right? It just doesn't. And so it was a nice win, I think, against a Chiefs team that is very vulnerable right now. It was great defense, although I think the Chiefs have got an enormous amount of problems. I don't think they're scary to anybody right now in the NFL. They look to me like one of the bottom 10 or 12 teams in the league, to be honest with you. And the Raiders, I think they might have something in O'Connell. I'm not quite sold yet on that deal. But they're going to Indianapolis, just got to win. They're playing at home. So I'm going to take the Colts at home. I know that was a long-winded way around it. But I just get a sense that let's stop the press. Antonio Pierce is doing everything he can to get that job next year. Remember 2 years ago when they went through the same exact thing? I can't remember the name of the coach at the time that they stuck in there down the stretch. Was it Pisaccia or something like that?
Yeah.
Rich Pisaccia, and he had a great finish. And I'll never forget, Derek Carr saying, "This is the closest this team has been since I've been here." And then Mark Davis didn't commit to him being the head coach. And so you got to question what's Davis going to do? Is he going to, buy into all the nonsense that Cowher and the boys are throwing around, that Raider football is coming back? First of all, if Raider football is coming back, move to Oakland, right? I mean, wouldn't that be in Oakland? I mean,
I can't. I'm stunned by that statement.
Is Cliff Branch still on the team?
So, on my way to Vegas, I drove by Mount Davis, as they used to call it here in the Bay Area. And if you have a chance to leave Mount Davis and go to a all-expensed brand new dome in the heart of Las Vegas, you can't not take that deal. The Raiders as a franchise are just way better off right now in Las Vegas than they were ever in the Oakland Coliseum. And I love the fan base in Oakland, and I wish they could have found a way to fix the issues that they had there with the stadium. But I have to say, I mean, for the same reason the Warriors moved to San Francisco and the A's are leaving town as well, there is politics at hand there that nobody could quite overcome. As for Mark Davis, look, how can he be so good in the WNBA, Brad? Back-to-back WNBA championships and so bad in the NFL. They made a mistake. They should have brought back their interim head coach from a couple years ago and let him ride it out and see what happens. I think they should learn from that mistake and at least give Antonio Pierce a 2-year deal to see what happens. I don't know that there's anything if you're not getting Harbaugh, then that's what I would do if I were Mark Davis at this point. As for this game, I don't know what to make of the Colts team right now. I just like this Raider team. Vegas is coming back to bite me on the road a lot.
Yeah, I see two teams that are really inconsistent. And at the end of the day, if the Raiders lose, they're out. I'm not sure what their chances are right now. I think I saw where if the Raiders win, they have a 30% chance of making the playoffs. Whereas the Colts, if they win, they got like a 70% chance of making the playoffs. And so at home, I'm going to go with the home team here. Two inconsistent teams. One's 8-7, one's 7-8. That speaks to who they are. They're both inconsistent teams, but I don't think the Raiders. I'm not buying into all the mystique that the Raider football is back and any of that stuff. Where was it the week before, right? I mean, they won one game against a Chief. I think that game said more about the Chiefs than it did about the Raiders, and I'm going to take the Colts.
Look, the mystique of Raider football is like America's team. That hasn't won a Super Bowl since the mid 90s.
Is Fred Biletnikoff still on the roster, Dave?
I mean, it would be like us sitting here going, the mystique of the Purple People Eaters still lives on in Minnesota.
Right.
It's ridiculous. But it's one of the, as the story of the National Football League has been written over the last 100 years, it's certainly one of the most entertaining chapters nonetheless, as Raiders pillage other football teams, as they would put it.
The autumn wind is a pirate. Remember that one, Dave? Remember that song?
Oh yeah, this is absolutely fantastic. And you have to remember that was made for television.
Yeah, I got news. John Vicenda is not walking through the door to announce the games and none of that stuff, right? It's Raider. When I hear announcers, that was my biggest beef. It wasn't the Raiders or anything. To me, it was just really lazy commentary. And it's by guys that are just way long in the tooth, Dave. Some of these guys, it's time to go.
Oh yeah, I mean, I love Terry Bradshaw, but I can't watch. I can't do it anymore. And
he's become a character of himself, really.
Yeah, and look, those shows are what those shows are. So, definitely better options on TV if you're jonesing for some football coverage Sunday morning before the start of a National Football League week. All right, Mr. Hoiseth, any final comments before we get out of here, Mr. On Air? Finally investing in the show is Hoiseth.
No real comments. It's been a good season. A lot of people are saying that it's great that they have these extra teams in the playoff. I don't like the idea still that one team in each conference gets a bye. I don't like that. To me, I don't think that's fair. I think they should all have to play. I mean, if there's 8 teams in each conference that make the playoffs and you're getting the 8th seed, isn't that enough of a gift without having to give them an entire week off? I don't like it. I think you either go back to 6 or you go to 8. I don't like the 7 at all.
Yeah. I think with sort of the parity in the National Football League, and the jobs that GMs actually have to do. The unsung heroes of the National Football League are sort of like the player personnel people. Because, the NFL is, as it's gotten faster and as players have gotten stronger, and even despite all of the advances in healthcare and diets and the Tom Brady enigmas in the world, but with all of that aside, it has become very important that you've got a good player personnel team and general manager leading the way, because as you've seen, just the quarterback position alone, you're probably going to need 3 or 4 different quarterbacks to get through a season. I don't recall a season where I've seen so many injuries across the board that I've seen this year, and I'm not just talking about the QB position. I think that while these records mean something at the end of the season, it really tends to come down to is there a team that's getting hot? Or there are a couple teams that are getting hot, because I guess outside of the Ravens, there's really no clear-cut dominant team. I mean, you would have said the 49ers. But
Dave, I still think the 49ers are the best team in football, and I still think they're going to win the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
The team that's hot, though, you mentioned it earlier, the Rams are going to make things interesting.
Yeah. I was just going to say that, like the Rams could certainly come in and look, Brock Purdy is, who Brock Purdy is. He's if they, and I said this about the 49ers Achilles heel or weakness is that offensive line. And yes, you can run against the left side of the line fairly easily, but everything else is not as good as you think. It is a middle of the road offensive line. And with a quarterback like Brock Purdy, I worry that you're going to see him melt down in the playoffs like he did. And I think that's going to be the issue with this 49ers team. And a team like the Rams, or God forbid, Brad, Baker Mayfield and the Bucs, could do something interesting. I mean, they've got enough firepower and offense to certainly make things interesting.
Yeah, I don't think it's the Eagles are in it for the long haul. I just don't think their defense is good enough. The Cowboys do play some defense from time to time, and when their offense is right, they can be pretty good, but they got to get you at home, right?
Yeah.
And then after that, the Rams really, the Buccaneers are playing pretty good football in a subpar conference. The Rams are, making a run here. They look like the team, like you said, that might be the hottest right now. It wouldn't be one team that I'd want to run into. And then the question is can the Lions get things turned around? Because at the beginning of the year, they look like one of the better teams in football. But, there's a lot of parity out there right now. No question about it. But I'm glad to see that through all that parity, you're taking the Commanders this weekend. That's my
I saw that. I was like, oh, shit. I want to flip-flop on that right now, but I'm not. I'm going to stick with the district. All right. That is it for this week's Week 17 episode of Gods of Odds. That is Brad Hoiseth over there in beautiful Southern California. I'm Dave Dabbah up in Northern California, wishing you all a tremendous rest of your sports viewing week.